Zero waste and zero carbon is a social issue first, a market issue second. If we can get that mantra, if we can get politicians to get that statement, then all of a sudden things start happening.
My guest today is Eric Lombardi, a lifetime environmentalist. Eric was at the forefront of the zero waste movement in the mid-1990s, a full decade before it would become an aspirational goal for the United States as well as the rest of the world. In 2008, though, it seemed like the world woke up, and suddenly Eric was everywhere talking about zero waste. On the cover of Newsweek magazine, as a guest on NPR, he was featured in the Smithsonian magazine and many other locations. And the global march towards zero waste took a giant leap forward. Eric began his journey in 1984 by taking the reins of Ecocycle, a small nonprofit recycler located in Boulder, Colorado. And he grew it into one of the largest community-based recycling and zero waste social enterprises in the entire world. He was also invited to attend the Clinton White House in 1998 as one of the top U.S. recyclers. After 24 years of building the largest zero waste social enterprise in the country, Eric refocused his efforts to help build and nurture the global social enterprise movement needed to build the zero waste, zero carbon communities our future demands. Eric was a delight to talk to. He's an old friend who I hadn't seen in decades, and we had a lot of fun talking. He's a visionary, he's a doer, and I just hope you really enjoy this conversation between myself and Eric Lombardi. Hello, Eric Lombardi.
Hello, Debbie Rowan.
Welcome to How We Changed the World podcast. Yeah.
So glad to be here.
I mean, isn't this something? You never know who you're going to run into on a podcast.
From the past. It's good to see you.
From the past. So for those listening who would have no way of knowing this, Eric and I have known each other since really a long time. I'm not going to say the year and age myself, but we went to grade school together. We went to high school together, and we were neighbors. We had one house between us for all those years. So how I lost track of you, I haven't seen you since, I think, haven't talked to you since junior in high school, maybe. So we have some catching up to do. We won't do it on the show. But now here you are. You're all grown up. You're so intelligent and charismatic. And, honestly, we're here to talk about things like zero waste and climate change and a business model called social enterprise. And I think the last time we talked, it was probably something like, are you going to go to algebra or are we going to ditch? So we're gonna have to get used to who the other person is now. But anyway, it seems like I barely looked away, and you spent your life basically trying to make the world better. And I just appreciate everything that you've been doing all these years and create such positive change. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be a real pleasure talking to you about our lives and what we've been up to. I love the book you wrote. I'm going to make a plug since you probably won't, but all your listeners got to read Deb's first book. It was stunningly good.
Thank you. Maybe I'll put a link in the notes. I haven't done that before. So, well, I know some of what you've been up to, and I'm just going to hit a couple of high points and have you, obviously go through and fill out the good stuff. But you were for so many years, I don't know how many years, executive director of Ecocycle, which you took over as a small nonprofit and grew it to be like the largest social enterprise, and basically turned it into something huge, which has made a powerful difference in Boulder, Colorado, where it's located. So we're going to talk about that a lot and how you made the change in Boulder and how they do everything they do with waste. It's been amazing. And you've also been at the forefront of the global zero waste movement, which you started that, like, I think 20 years before anybody else even heard that term or understood that term. So that's something we're definitely going to delve into. And now, and then just, there's so many things that you've done. You were at the Clinton White House, what was that like? Was that fun? Was that an amazing experience?
There's actually a story there. I was in the middle of fighting for Ecocycle's life in Boulder at the time. We called it the War of '98. And it's amazing how people wanted to kill Ecocycle, because especially the waste.
Really?
We were really impacting their profits and their bottom line.
Whose profits?
Recycling. The waste, trash, garbage haulers.
Oh.
And that industry is a real take no prisoners kind of industry. And so in '98, we were fighting for our lives because they, in my opinion, had a couple of government officials in their pocket, and they were trying to kill us. And so they scheduled this crucial hearing.
When you say trying to kill you mean they were trying to kill Ecocycle, the business, not humans.
Right. That's right. There was the biggest project in our life was coming up, was the new recycling, the new multi-million-dollar recycling facility was going to be built. We designed it, but they wanted to take away the operating contract for us, which would have killed us. They wanted to give it to the local trash hauler. And so there was a big public hearing, and the government official knew that I was going to the White House, so he scheduled it that night that I was supposed to be in the White House. He scheduled the public hearing, so I couldn't go. I had to stay in Boulder, so I missed it. Oh,
you didn't ever get to go to the White House? Whoa, you were dedicated to your... so you were invited to the White House, but you didn't show up at the... Which was...
Exactly.
And they were going to honor you. They were honoring you for being one of the top 100 recyclers in the country, right?
Right. And we were in a study. We were in a group of us. We're going to be advising the Clinton White House on national policy. We were going to have an all-day workshop. And so
wow.
I was able to get another progressive nonprofit recycler to take my seat. And then that night I went to that public hearing, and the next morning I was on the cover of the local newspaper with my fist in the air because we scored a huge victory that night. So it was really important that I was there.
Interesting. Wow. Well, that was a big sacrifice, and it speaks a lot to your dedication to what you were doing. Absolutely. Yeah. So you did that for 24 years. You ran Ecocycle. You took it from this little tiny, struggling, as I've learned, recycling business to just a huge player in this country and even in the world stage with your leadership, I think, in that zero waste. So we're going to get into that, what that even is and what it means, and why zero waste is so important and such an aspirational goal, and has a lot to do with our entire emergency climate. And you did a number of other things, and maybe we'll just kind of merge them in as we go, as that naturally comes up. But you've because I know you were in water conservation and solar before you even got into recycling, so you've really been kind of doing a lot of different things. So, and I wanted to just mention this, that I listened to that Remake podcast a couple of times. I listened to it a month ago, and then I listened to it again recently. And this was an interview that you had on a podcast, I think it was January 22. So I'm going to put the links to that in the show notes, because I learned so much about zero waste and social enterprise. And because he's in the same industry as you, at least tangentially, you could really go deep with all these subjects. So for anybody who wants to really go deep and understand them with some more texture to it, more granularity, I really love it. It was a fantastic interview. Really learned a lot. Yeah.
No, that was a good one. That was fun.
It was very good. It's very interesting. So one of the things I learned on there, in fact, was how, just to back up a little bit in your life, just before you even went to work, how early in life you knew who you were, how early you found out who you were and what mattered to you. And And that to me was so surprising, because it seems like before, just in college and maybe graduate school, you really understood that you wanted to make a difference in the world, and you really understood how you wanted to make a difference, to some degree. And I'm just wondering where did that come from? And maybe you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned your family and your spiritual path, and just some of the experiences that you had. You don't have to go in too deep, but you really figured it out much earlier, I think, than most people.
Well, it's a blessing and a curse. As you know, I was raised Roman Catholic.
I do know that.
I very much got the message from the priests and the nuns and my mother that we were here for a purpose. And my mom wanted me to be a priest or a doctor or something important. And so I got a lot of messages that, we were here for a reason. The Jesuits behind Blessed Sacrament in Denver, where I was, they're very much about changing the world. So I think I got that just interesting to me. Like I said, I think it's a blessing and a curse, because I really was not free to not go on this path. I really didn't perceive another way. Not to say I didn't go and just absolutely after high school went and I ski bummed for a year up in the mountains, and that was the most. I'm glad I survived it. It was a really debauched year, and after that year, I felt very empty. I had a great time skiing and partying with all my buddies, but I did feel rather empty. And so I had a bunch of spiritual experiences for a couple of years after that, Buddhism and born-again Christianity and all this stuff. Really? Kind of searching around, like, what's it all about? And I think being a city boy, growing up just off Colfax Avenue there, I didn't have the environment very deeply in my experience until high school. And this is where I say something that people are going to laugh, but it's not so funny anymore, and that is, I did mushrooms in the woods, and that changed me for the better. Now, people are discovering that mushrooms are a good thing for a lot of people to have, and at that time of my life, they were a good thing for me. And
I didn't even know that people took. I didn't know that was even a thing. Yeah. I mean, honestly, in high school, and can you describe that experience a little bit? Because I was mesmerized by that story you told about laying on the ground. I was with my buddies, and my older sister Laura was sort of my spiritual guide back in those high school days. And as you know, Blessed Sacrament, I got a very good education in grade school, and then I went to a public high school, East High in Denver. And I was so far ahead of the other kids, I never had to crack a book. Right. So, and I just got B's. So, my high school years were all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it was kind of crazy. And my older sister helped me get through that without getting in too much trouble or getting hurt. Really? And she said, this stuff's powerful. You don't do this like drinking beer at a party. This stuff's, there's a reason behind the mushrooms and stuff. So my friends and I would go up to the mountains, and I remember that day outside Breckenridge one day, we're in the woods. And daytime in the woods is the time to do mushrooms. And I was laying on my belly next to the Blue River, and I was looking into the water, and it was just like a little hobbit world. It was really beautiful, and I felt very much at peace. And my molecules dissolved into the earth, and the earth dissolved into me. And for just, I don't know how long, I felt like I was not different from what I was laying on, the earth. And I realized, there's something going on here. I wasn't quite sure what had happened. But ever since that moment, I realized, we're all connected in a way that is so deep, and I don't understand it, but I know it's real. I have felt it. So I find that experience fascinating, because this idea that we're all one and we're all connected, and that what you do to the earth and what you do to one another, you do to yourself, that's something that I have heard people talk about for the last 10, 20 years, maybe at the most in my environment. It's something that I believe so much, and it helps it makes this saving the planet, helping society. It makes it make sense. But the fact that happened to you at such a young age, to me, is remarkable. And I would not at all be surprised if that wasn't the number one impetus in guiding you on your path, because once you get to that realization, there's no turning back from that. So if I slug you in the stomach or something, I'm going to feel it. Like it does impact me. And I think that knowing that and feeling that and experience that changes it for everyone and takes away some of that greed and insensitivity to the world that we've got us where we are right now with all the problems that you're working on.
I really agree with what you just said. And I think that having that experience, like you said, there's no going back. So it made me so calm and brave when I was at the microphone in front of all these powerful people, because I had touched a truth that I didn't doubt. And so when they pushed back on me, I was okay. It was like, say whatever you want. I know what I know.
Yeah.
And so I was rather outspoken as a young professional, and a lot of people would say, hey, dude, slow down. You're pushing too hard. And I would be like, okay, I'm sorry. It's just that, what I'm saying is true. This whole thing of going from recycling to zero waste, even the biggest recyclers in the country rejected me and my little group in 1996 because they said that's a step too far. We just got recycling accepted, and now you're going to make us the laughing stock. And that didn't shake me or my little band of folks, because we knew zero waste was the next step.
Yeah,
that's just the first step.
So far ahead of the curve. So far ahead of the curve as the rest of the world. So but you saw the truth. So that's really what's driven you. That's amazing. That's really cool. Well, I think why don't we talk about zero waste? Because I think when the general public or people who this isn't their world or they haven't been exposed to it, they think, well, that'd be nice not to have landfills or to have everybody wants a cleaner world. They want animals protected, so that's sort of a thing that everyone knows about. But I think the true power of zero waste and how it's tied to climate change and, that link is critical. And so maybe it would help other people to find that same goal, or see the importance of it. So can you talk, maybe we'll go into a little bit more in a while, but just even on the big picture, could you make the connection between like zero waste and how that might affect our climate crisis?
Sure. First, I will defuse the number one pushback we get, where people, especially engineers, say it's impossible to ever achieve zero. And in fact, even in the pioneering little group that started all this, we were arguing. And I was actually the one that made peace, and I said, look, let's call it zero waste or darn near. And let's say if we can get to 90% landfill diversion, we've changed the world enough to claim victory. And that you could call yourself a zero waste community if you get to 90% recovery. And the reason 90% was picked was because 90% of what's in your trash can, there is a use for it. Either recycled, reused, composted, repaired. 90% has the ability to be upgraded and used again. So we said, okay, if we can get to that, we've achieved our goal of changing the world's perspective on what we're throwing away, because there is no way, right? So that defused the engineers, and they said, okay, we can live with 90% because, we understand. And then we studied the last 10% to find out what's in there, and that was interesting unto itself. But so what zero waste does is it's now called circular economy, by the way.
So do you equate those as the same thing? Is that the same thing?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. They took all of our earlier work. What's her name out of England? MacArthur.
Ellen MacArthur.
Yeah, she's great. And she had the realization while she was out kayaking, she saw the crap in the ocean. But yeah, she basically took all the foundations that we had laid with all of our reports. By the way, we wrote a really good report in 2008 called Stop Trashing the Climate. And it links climate change and zero waste in a way that
really
no other document's done, in my opinion. So look for Stop Trashing the Climate.
I will.
Online. You can get it free through the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. Brenda Platt was the lead author. So yeah, all of a sudden we had these people coming to it saying, oh, 2008 was the year we became credible. So 12 years we were laughed at. 12 years we were in the wilderness. No one really believed what we were saying. And then in 2008, something happened. All of a sudden, I'm on NPR, Smithsonian Magazine, New York Times. All of a sudden, everybody...
I know.
It's not crazy. Look.
Well, what happened? What caused that? You don't know. It's just the time had come, maybe?
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's the water bucket theory of social change. You get a bucket. Every act you take is another drop of water in the bucket until the bucket fills. And then some event kicks the bucket over and everybody gets wet. And they're like, oh, and everybody gets it all at once. And that's what happened with zero waste. Everybody got it at once. It was like, wow. So that happened, and then it has evolved into circular economy, which is great. But I'll be honest with you, the circular economy is a concept that I think is more appropriate for business, the business world, corporate world, okay? Because the circular economy requires a top-down power that communities in democracies don't have. Okay?
Eric, I want to stop you before you. I wanted you to explain that, but I think what we haven't done yet is define our terms.
Okay.
So maybe if you can just start with, just take a minute to describe exactly what zero waste is. I mean, you're inferring it basically that you said we recycle, but zero waste is basically, like if you had to say it in a sentence, how would you describe that? And then I want to talk about circularity, circular economy a little bit that same way. Okay.
Well, I would first say that waste is not a first principle. It doesn't exist in nature. Waste is food for everything else, okay? So waste is a human construct, and it's from bad design. So we can design out waste so that things are repaired, reused, recycled, composted, okay? It all begins with the design of the stuff of our lives. So if we design it right, there's very little waste. There'll still be a little, but very little. So that's zero waste. Let's get the cycle going. And that's very much circular economy, too. They're saying the same thing. Let's design our world so that whatever mineral we take out of the ground gets used and reused as much as possible. So the trick here, though, is that in the business world and in the civilian world, there's different drivers and abilities and agency to fulfill the vision. And circular economy is fun because if you're the head of a corporation, you're the CEO, you can tell the company, look, we're not going to buy any stuff that is designed for the dump, right? We're going to buy stuff designed for recovery. And so the CEO can put that into the company, and then all of a sudden everybody's behaving, and they're buying circular items.
Right.
And
which, go ahead.
Then think of your life in your town. The mayor, we've been trying to get government procurement on board forever to start spending tax dollars more smartly. And we tried green procurement, we tried, buy recycled, we've tried all these campaigns, but everybody still pursues the cheapest item.
Right. And circular is not, it's going to take some time for the circular economy to fully get through. I mean, it's going to take maybe decades for our economy to become a circular economy. So, right. And so it's more expensive at this point because we're at the beginning of it. So people want to go buy something that came from Vietnam or was sold, sewn there and shipped because it's cheaper. So, okay.
Yeah, perfect. You hit it on.
And actually, before, I just want to say one other thing. I wore this shirt specifically today because it's an example of that. I got this shirt from Unless because I'm talking about doing the clothing. Unless is one of the companies in the U.S. they're not fully circular, but everything they make, like this shirt, is 100% biodegradable. So but it costs more. It definitely costs more than a T-shirt from Target, as we used to call it. So, but there's no plastic. And it's the most comfortable thing in the world. So it's making its way in, but it's like one of the only countries. It's one of the only manufacturers in this country that I could buy one from. That's fully recycled, fully biodegradable, fully circular. And even then, it's not fully circular. So,
Well, now you're talking about something that touches everybody's life every day, including mine. I make buying decisions every day.
Right.
And the economy we lived in is not a first order. It's not a natural event either. It's a human-created system, like an operating system for a computer. And the system right now is programmed to make it more profitable to be dirty than clean. We can change the programming. We have the power to change the feedback loop in the economy so the green companies win and their products are cheaper than the dirty companies. Okay? We can do that. Cheaper. The trick is people have been trying to do this for 60 years called environmental economics. And what you have to do is put a value on the pollution, dollar value on the pollution. And that's where all the controversy comes. But honestly, there are environmental economists who have put dollar values on all this pollution from our stuff. And if we were to add that to the product price, that green shirt wouldn't be more expensive than the dirt shirt. So
that's brilliant.
It's complicated and it's never really taken.
And it's hard to grasp. It's a little bit hard to grasp, like valuing dirt, valuing the dirtiness part, or putting a number on that, or value on it.
But that is half the equation for people like you and I. There's the system change that has to happen along that level. The economists have to get together. They have to convince the government, like the carbon tax. That's exactly what the carbon tax is.
That's what I was thinking of when you said that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's half the system. You and I can't pass a carbon tax, but society can. What you and I can, what we do though on our personal level, is we get educated about the choices we have. And that's a personal commitment, responsibility, and then we do the best we can. But ultimately, I get tired of individuals being burdened with too much of the change that's needed, because in fact, industry loves it when we all take it on our own shoulders, even though we're just, we're pretty weak in our ability to affect the marketplace, one person here and there. But industry loves it.
Why?
When we feel, well, they love it when we feel guilty. They love the culture wars. They love all these distractions.
Why? It's a distraction.
It's a distraction from the real issue, and that is
confuse people.
Why are coal power plants still operating? That's the real issue. Everyone knows we can't burn coal anymore.
So let's go back to tie that together, which is where we started a few minutes ago. How does zero waste help with climate change?
Wow, in lots of ways, and that's why we wrote a whole thing about it. Stop trashing the climate. But one of the biggest things is the amount of energy that is saved when you're reprocessing recycled materials versus virgin is huge. And reducing energy use is probably the number one climate change thing that we got to do. Including going away from fossil fuels to clean fuels, we just have to reduce the amount of energy we're using.
Right.
So that's one of the big ones. And then, of course, if you recover all of the discards that are organic and that are rotting in the landfills, creating methane, and they're belching methane into the atmosphere, when in fact, if we composted it and put it in the soils, made the soils more healthy, they'd be absorbing carbon. So the difference between your apple core in a landfill and your apple core in compost, there's a big difference, climate impact between those two.
Because it's creating methane, right?
Right.
Which had 12 times more powerful than CO2 gases, right?
Actually, that's an interesting number. When the climate scientists got together back in the late 80s and determined how much impact was for what gas, and they made CO2 the 100-year standard. They also created the 20-year standard, the 100-year standard, and the 500-year standard for climate gas impact. Yeah, nobody knows this. And the fact is, there were scientists advocating that we need the short term, we need the 20-year impact to actually create public policy around, because 100 years is too long. We can't fart around for 100 years.
I see.
And methane only stays in the atmosphere about 11 years. And during its life, it's 11 years, it's actually 100 times worse than carbon. And on the 20-year standard, it's 82 times worse. And we had a whole campaign 20 years ago to start using the 20-year standard instead of 100. And we had scientists from NCAR and Boulder on record saying, That is not a scientific issue. That's a public policy issue. You're free to use the 20-year standard because it's accurate. And now you're going to start reading more and more media outlets are saying 82 times. So I would love it if you did too, because methane is really, really bad actor. And if we focus on methane right now as a world, we will have the fastest, biggest impact on climate change possible.
If we could reduce it, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is really interesting, because when people talk about animal agriculture and how much methane that creates, I've never heard this 20-year, 50-year, 100-year metric, which really changes everything, because that makes that a much bigger contributor to global heating, I guess, and it seems like than anyone gives it credit for. Because you hear numbers like if you took away animal agriculture, it would reduce it by 10% or 20%. But given what you're saying, it seems like many more times that has a much bigger effect. Okay,
it really does. And we all need to keep our eyes on a new project that the Environmental Defense Fund is doing. They're launching a satellite called the methane satellite, and it's going to be able to pinpoint and measure methane releases on the planet, on the surface, which then will let activists like us go chase down the people who are emitting it and try to get them shut down or tighten up or something. So the EDF is on track for a really interesting project.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So many, we kind of are jumping around to so many things. I wanted to go back and talk about how you came to where you are now, but I don't know. We've lost, we might have lost the thread a little bit on that, because I guess that what I would like to know is when you started with recycling, I don't know, maybe just take us a little bit through a few years of how it evolved, because it was started off with just basic recycling. Because the reason I kind of want to do this is because we're all still out here doing our best to recycle, but it feels like a failure at this point. Like most people's houses I go into are like, whatever, I'm too confused. Should I wash it? Does it work? I drive my Amazon bags over to King Soopers to recycle. I mean, it's not making any sense. And it's been like 40 years since the 80s, right?
Yeah, I agree. There is no reason it should be so hard. And there is a way for it to work better. The system that we all need to be doing, there's two systems. I'll explain the one that 5,000 communities are doing. It's called pay as you throw. And like in Boulder, we have 3 bins at every house. One is for recycling, one is for organics, and one is for trash, landfill. And the only bin you pay for is the landfill bin.
Oh, very good.
And you have a choice of size, small, medium, large. So you save a lot of money if you get the smallest landfill bin, because you recycle and compost a lot of stuff. Then you save a lot of money compared to the person that doesn't recycle and they get the largest trash bin. They're paying more than double what I'm paying.
Okay.
So you give people a financial reason to pay attention to which bin, because it's not that tough. Which bin does this go in?
No, it's not. Well, it is here. It is in like Denver, but so Boulder, and this is, I'm sure, maybe completely, I would give you all the credit. I don't know, maybe you don't get it all, but to getting Boulder to that, I mean, it's a progressive city anyway, but to get it to that level.
Well, like I said, there used to be 5, I think now there's 7,000 communities with pay as you throw.
That's great.
It's not just Boulder.
Right, but I mean,
you're in a city where you don't pay a trash bill. Denver just comes and picks your stuff up, and the property taxes pay.
Right.
So how is Denver going to reward you for recycling if you don't pay every month? So that battle was 30 years, and no politician in Denver was going to kill their career by proposing charging everybody a trash bill every month.
Yeah.
when it was invisible. So a lot of cities are like that, where the city pays for it, and you can't create this individual home incentive. And that has to be changed, because that really got people to pay attention.
Well, I think that's really important too, because people don't make that connection. People are concerned about global warming. They're not as concerned about trash. They just don't put it together. Right. So and people are willing to do things about global warming. They're willing to go buy an e-car. but they're still not willing to recycle properly. So somehow that message has to get through to people that this is impacting more than just what's being recycled into clothing, or, you know, it has to relate it to, this is your children's survival. Now can you recycle?
Yeah. Well, and energy use. I mean, it's huge. When you make an aluminum can out of an aluminum can, you save like 90% of the energy that's used to make the first can.
90%. Wow.
Yes, it's huge.
That is huge.
And glass is the same way. When you smelt down sand and stuff, that's a hugely energy intensive thing.
Yeah.
But making bottle to bottle is half the energy. So there's huge energy reductions there. And then, of course, composting to make the soil better.
Right.
Absorbs more copper. So those are the two biggies.
How can we educate people more? I mean, I went on Denver's Hard to Recycle, which I know that's something that you came up with in Boulder a long time ago. In fact, that was something that you were the first in, finding how to take, where to take, you know, hard to recycle items. Right. I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought where I was headed with that. But anyway,
go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, you were just speculating, how do we get people to understand that message? And
So, for example, okay, thank you for taking me back there, because when I look on Denver's website, City of Denver, where do you take hard to recycle items? It's from 2015. And it just lists random companies. They may or may, I mean, I guess they're still in business, but you have to drive really far. So there's no education. So I guess what I want to ask you is who is responsible? Like, where should the onus be on helping incentivize us as citizens or educate us? Because it's not, that's where I feel like nobody makes the connections between what their actions are and what the outcome is.
Yeah. Two answers to that. The first one is we have to do a better job in our schools teaching about the science of waste.
Okay.
Because that's a true subject. And when the kids learn about the science of waste, then they grow up understanding it's an issue and they need to pay attention to it. And then the second thing is a bigger systems change, and that is where these dirty companies get to make all the profits. You know, the government has to intervene on that and let the companies, charge the companies a fee, because then they'll charge the consumer a fee, or it needs to be explicit, like the advanced recycling fee that some European countries label on products. And when you buy a product, a lot of containers, but I mean computers and all kinds of stuff, there is an advanced recovery fee put on it, and you pay it at the register. And when you're done with that product, you bring it back to get your $10 back or whatever. They make it visible as you consume, as you're purchasing and consuming.
That's good. I like that too.
They make it visible. So that's educate. Again, it's financial too. Hitting our pocket.
It has to be both.
It really does. People pay attention to money.
Well, that actually is a great segue into what really is you're focused on now, and I just think this is I want to learn more about it. And so we're talking about social enterprise, which is a form of business, not a nonprofit, not a for-profit, but somewhere in the middle. So maybe just start at the beginning, and I also want to know how it relates to the environment and why this is such a green movement.
It is my focus now, because after running Ecocycle for almost 25 years and being so unique, there were not many Ecocycles in the country. And I was like, why is that? Why are we so unique? It's not that we're smarter. I realized we had a business structure that very few others had. And that was that we were a mission-driven business, meaning we needed to make a profit, but we didn't maximize profit. We made enough to grow and to expand our programs, but we poured everything back into our mission. Nobody owned us, so we didn't have stockholders or any of that stuff. We were a community business.
Who does own it? Who did own it?
No one did, because I was a nonprofit. Okay. So we're a classic nonprofit. You know who else is a social enterprise? Is the Humane Society. Think about that. Do you get a puppy for free?
No, you don't. You pay.
No. they're a business. They're a mission-driven business around animal welfare.
Okay.
We're a mission-driven business around environmental protection. Okay? There's a lot of mission-driven businesses in the world, and more every year. So anyway, but the bottom line here is that we needed a legal structure, and the UK started it in 2008, where you're a for-profit company, but you are limited by a few rules. And the number one rule was at least 51% of your profits have to go back into your mission, legally. Okay? So you're allowed to take 49% of your profits out to pay back to investors or whatever, but 51% has to be documented back in.
Interesting.
And the second thing is you have to have a stated social mission. You have to be solving a social or environmental problem to get this
social or environmental.
Okay? Now, why would a company want to do this? Well, Ecocycle ran into a ceiling, a financial ceiling. As a nonprofit in America, you can't have investors. And I wanted to build my next big project at Ecocycle in 2004 was to build a $6 million compost facility. We had just built a $14 million recycling facility with county tax money. Now, but the county wasn't going to fund composting. The city wasn't. Everybody thought recycling was over. And we're like, no.
Over?
That is composting and zero waste. Remember, this is early on.
Yeah.
Still scratching their heads going, didn't we win? We recycle now.
Oh, so we're done. They started with recycling like we're finished that.
Right. Especially the politicians, because recycling is expensive for them for 20 years. And they said, oh, no, please don't start another cycle asking us for money.
Wow.
So they basically closed the door, and I went to the local bank, and they said, well, we can't lend you that money because if we ever foreclosed on you, we'd be the village idiots and everyone would hate us. So we would be like a partner, and we don't partner. So anyway, the point being is I discovered in 2008 that for-profit nonprofits, basically as a social enterprise in the UK, I could get investors, which is what I needed.
Amazing.
In the US. I needed investors to build that plant. And I had a mission. I would commit to 51% of the profits going into the mission, no problem. So I had all the stuff lined up. And
but there's no structure like that in the U.S.
There's no structure in the U.S. So I was part of a movement to get a legal structure called the L3C, which is LLCs are a uniquely American approach to business.
I didn't know that.
Limited liability companies. And they're wonderful because they're really creative. And basically, we added another L on the beginning. Basically, it said low profit limited liability company. So L3C, 3 L's, basically when you went to an investor, you'd say, we exist for a mission, we're going to make a profit, but we're not going to maximize the profit because we're going to make enough to grow, but we're putting it into the mission. That's our point. So 11 states passed laws for L3Cs.
Oh, they did?
Yeah. So like Wyoming was, right up front. So you can incorporate Wyoming as an L3C, but most banks, most government, America doesn't know anything about L3Cs. So
does Colorado have one?
No, we tried and tried. Yeah.
Oh.
That was a real fight for a while, and then we realized it's not going to win. Anyway. So anyway, but the point being here is that there's a lot of green investors out there.
Right.
And Bill Gates got in on this early. He realized rather than give you a grant, nonprofit, I would rather invest in a social enterprise. And over time, you'll pay me back. Plus, I'm helping the world. So Gates created a whole big fund, Social Enterprise Investment Fund, which is now $2 billion. And he's seeding social enterprises all around the world as a part investor. So I guess that's the bottom line is think about the Humane Society. Think about some of your nonprofits in your town. They're actually businesses, but they're doing business on behalf of the community. That's what social enterprise is. So I want to add that in the waste industry, I believe that as long as you have cheap landfills, recycling and composting will never compete against that. Digging a hole in the ground and dumping stuff, you can't beat it. It's so darn cheap. Only because the pollution is not accounted for.
Right.
If you get the environmental...
Back to our earlier message, yes.
That's right. And I've seen the numbers for the environmental economists, and actually landfills are incredibly expensive, 10 times more than recycling and composting if you add the pollution costs.
The health standards and
Oh, the groundwater pollution, the air pollution, it just goes on and on. So, so what was I saying?
Well, you were talking about social enterprises and how that can help with the environment, as far as
the waste industry. So really, for society, it's a social issue first, a market issue second. And I've been saying that for 30 years. Waste is a social issue first, and a market issue second. We need to understand that. And I think we're at that place with energy now. Energy is a social issue first and a market issue second. The market is not going to clean up the planet. The market is not going to reduce greenhouse gases. The market is going to pursue money. Okay? So that is what has to change. Is the pursuit of profit has to be turned like a big ship. And we need to understand that social intervention, there's already a lot of social intervention in the market, the free market. Well, now we just have to make it explicit. And I want to share something really interesting I shared with you. New York Times a couple days ago.
Yeah.
This big new $39 billion high-tech chip initiative that President Biden is putting out there, he just added a social clause onto that whole bill. And basically, if you as a high-tech company want access to that money, you have to provide your workers with daycare, high-quality daycare. What? That's not a market issue.
Okay, wait. Is this such a departure? Is this an unusual thing for the government to do?
Yes.
So this is a change in strategy for the U.S. government.
And it's being debated right now. The very next day, there was another article saying how President Biden is using the power of the federal government's budget to change society. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about it because that's exactly what he's doing. He is using the expenditure of our tax dollars, which, come on, that's our money. Don't we want it spent better, cleaner? If that's the place to start.
So I don't so you're trying to. I'm trying to understand what your goal is with social enterprise. Is to get it something that would be available to every state, for example, so that say in Boulder you'd be able to utilize that so that you could do more social good.
Yeah, the very first thing we need to do is to get the power structure to understand in America how social enterprise works.
Yeah.
It is expanding right now in the UK, Australia, South Korea, New Zealand, a lot of other countries get
Scotland for sure. Yeah.
Scotland for sure.
Yeah.
So the governments are there going, wow, this is like getting double bang for our buck here. These businesses are actually in business to help the community, so the government doesn't have to do everything. So yes, the number one goal is we need to get America to understand what a social enterprise is. Then what we need to do is we need to get, like waste, basically the government structure saying, okay guys, all you waste companies, they did this in Scotland, by the way, we have a 10-year zero waste goal. You can either join us in getting there or go do another business, because basically the government is going to take over policy and decide who makes the money in the waste industry. And if you're green, you're going to make money. If you're dirty, you're going to be out of business in 10 years. If you're a landfill, you're gone. So that's the kind of direct policy clarity the market needs. And the market, when they get that kind of clarity over 10 years, in Scotland, the trash haulers got on board. They're like, okay, I can deal with that. 10 years, I can change my business plan. You've given me
and they would become social enterprises themselves?
No, they would become recyclers and composters, supported with some government extra money because it's more expensive than landfilling, to help bridge them away from the landfilling profits into the cleaner profits. So there's this bridge period.
So I see two things. Well, there's probably a lot of areas where people are pushing back against social enterprise, but one is from an investor to hear the word low profit is never very sexy. And then the other pushback would just be that are we slipping towards socialism, which, you know, I mean, which is said if you do anything good at all, you know, so
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. We've gotten a lot of pushback on the low profit part.
It's just a terminology. It's maybe you should say reasonable profit.
Well, exactly. I've tried that. It's rather than maximizing profit, we're going for a reasonable profit. One of the reasons I'm in favor of the term low profit, and I get a lot of pushback on this, is because it delineates us clearly from the greenwashers, from the companies that want to say they're a social enterprise, and there are plenty of them out there, to the ones that really are. I want a really clear line between us and them. And so low profit draws that line in the sand and says, this is who we are. The other thing that's interesting, the UK said, okay, investors, if you invest in social enterprises, we will only tax your profits at 50%. So all of a sudden, the investors went, oh,
yeah,
I like
now
that.
We're talking. Now we're talking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because the government said, hey, if that company succeeds, it's good for all of us. It's good for us. So we'll only tax you half, 50%.
So it's a tall order in the U.S., though, to get that type of thinking accomplished.
It is, especially at a federal level. We don't do anything in this country at a national level very well. Yeah. So it's a state-by-state deal.
Right.
And even that is that's a bad
yeah. Well, I hope it's not the only solution, because we need one of the things that you talked about was in that podcast remake was we need big action. We're done with incremental action. There are some social problems that we can work on incrementally, and it's good, and everybody kind of gets used to an idea, and then we take the next step, and then we take the next step. But we're facing something very daunting that people don't seem to want to look at, because there's a lot of eco grief, in which I share in. I mean, it is scary, but to not look at it is not the answer, and to not act quickly. And we have to be smart, but we can't live incrementally. We can't make these changes because you started in the 80s in recycling, and you're still trying to talk people into zero waste. These many decades later, in meantime, we've lost so many species, and we've lost so much progress towards reducing global warming. We're all seeing the effects of that with climate change. So how do we make those really big leaps? And is this one of them that you're talking about? Like, do you feel like this is one of those giant steps to move towards social enterprise?
Yeah. That's so hard. Just asking, it's like, I do not have the answer to that one. I don't think anybody does. And it is very hard on the heart. Like Terry Tempest Williams said, we all have to learn how to live in the world with a broken heart. And it's so true. We have to keep going, but we can't ignore. And we don't have time for incremental change. It's really amazing, though, in my experience. Most of the people in a community love it when a big change happens and it works, okay? And they're on board. They may push back, but once it's in place, they're like, oh, that's easy, it's great, it makes sense, I'm happy. So how do we unfreeze local governments to act? Because they're all frozen right now by vocal minorities that are just shouting them down. Our whole media environment is part of the problem. No one knows who to trust anymore.
Right.
And all this rhetoric about calling each other names, socialists, all this other stuff.
Wasting time.
It's that culture war stuff that I think the real masters of the universe, the rich oligarchs, they love it when we fight each other. Because they really don't want to have the capitalism 2.0. They really don't want us to address the fundamental flaws with the market economy. I'm all for profit. I'm all for the market economy, but I also understand that it is an operating system and for the planet Earth, and we've got to update it to reflect the problems, the bugs in the system, and. That will, is that going to take Captain Kirk coming in on a starship and telling us y'all blew it? I mean, who has the authority to lay that out and convince the world I don't see it. The United Nations doesn't have that authority.
No.
So the U.S. probably has the biggest bully pulpit, but here we are. On the one hand, Biden's done some amazing environmental stuff, and the United States has. But then on the other hand, our version of cutthroat bottom line capitalism is not very attractive to a lot of people.
Yeah.
They see through it. I've been traveling in and out of Europe for 40, 50 years. Young Europeans used to want to come to America. They don't anymore.
One of the things that you talk about is systems change. We need major system change in 2 areas in order to really beat this, right? Like one of them is waste. One of them is energy. I think you said the other one is mobility, if I'm not mistaken, which confused me.
Okay. The reason
Can you explain that?
Yeah. The amount of greenhouse gas emissions from the way we get around right now, we've become a planet of like ants. We're always moving around.
Yeah. Good analogy.
We're emitting massive amounts of CO2 as we do that. So I think that we have to rethink how we move. And everybody keeps wanting to do the battery-powered electric vehicles. And it's like, I think people don't realize the environmental impact of mining to make all the batteries that is going to make that possible. It's a disaster. It's not going to happen.
Is it? It's not going to happen. It's not the answer?
No, batteries are not the answer. They are an answer for some stuff, but they're not the answer.
Right.
So we have to be getting more creative about alternative ways of moving ourselves and our trucks around, because that's not going to end. We've created a world where mobility is a thing. And so we do need to come up with better modes. And I don't mean I do mean bike lanes and stuff in your town, but I'm thinking much bigger than that. I'm thinking the semi-trucks across the United States, they're going to be running on hydrogen heat pumps, electric pumps. So, we set up hydrogen filling stations along the major interstates. That kind of, we got to be thinking huge infrastructure adjustments like that.
Well, that helps me understand it, because I was thinking, isn't mobility just a subsection or subset of energy use? But really, it needs its own system change independently even of how we produce energy. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a lifestyle thing. Because every day we go out of our house and we go somewhere. How do you go? And
we're addicted to that. Yeah.
Every day we flick on our light switches. I want us to all have green light switches. You don't know where the electricity comes from. That's somebody else's job to make that.
Right.
Not yours. Because if you're rich, you can get solar panels, but that's 1% of the world.
Yeah. It's not all. Yeah.
No, it's ridiculous. Yeah. So,
well, and that must be how you got to this low carbon, with these cities. What is it? Not zero waste, zero carbon. Yeah.
Right.
And is that, we're pretty far away from that, but what would that look like?
It's funny, that campaign started out as the third Z, Z3, zero population growth.
Yeah, that's always raises eyebrows.
Right. It turns out that was too controversial. Yeah. And it distracted everybody from the zero waste, zero carbon. So we talked
I bet. Yeah.
So, I think, again, zero waste and zero carbon is a social issue first, a market issue second. If we can get that mantra, if we can get politicians to get that statement, then all of a sudden things start happening. And, there are social interventions in the marketplace that don't necessarily, they're not socialist because you still have private companies owning and running everything. Mm-hmm. But you've got the social, the government side, basically establishing the rules for how the money's made, who makes the most money. The green makes the profit.
What about someone like Patagonia? I mean, who definitely, the mission of, now they have, maybe they've changed, they have actually, I think, changed their mission to saving the planet is literally their mission. And it used to be to making money. So did they switch from like a for-profit? Because I'm thinking that they're part of the market, I mean, they use market, they use the market to get where they are and to help the planet, but now maybe they're shifting. But they're not. They're not a social enterprise.
Well, that's a very interesting case because I think it was 6 or 8 months ago They came out
pretty
pretty recently.
Yeah,
They basically said, okay, all of our companies going into some sort of environmental trust or something.
Yeah.
And
their mission has changed, yeah.
Right. So all of us in the social enterprise world, we're looking very carefully at that, and we're asking for the documents because we want to see what they actually said. Legally, what did they actually
do? Legally.
Because they would be the biggest company to convert from strictly for maximum profit to a social enterprise that we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Another interesting trend we're starting to see is lots of small businesses are owned by baby boomers, and the baby boomers in America are retiring. They don't necessarily want to sell their business. So they're trying to figure out how they can either sell it to their employees or convert it over to a social enterprise so it keeps going. So there's an interesting trend happening. There's a lot of discussion right now going, here's an opportunity. And I think young people are going to really enjoy being part owners more than just wage slaves. Having some equity in a company is going to make a difference for, I got 2 kids, 29 and 33, and they see the future of, working for a salary, every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's an ownership shift can happen here.
But your view of the future, your view of solving this problem that we're all facing, the major problems in terms of global warming and water quality and all the things that are environmentally based, I should say, the solving of those problems is with systems change. It's with environment. It's with mobility. It was the first one you said, and I know I just said this a minute ago, but mobility, energy, and waste. Not in that order.
I love that you just mentioned water quality, because think about water for a minute. That's never been a free market item. That's always been a social program first. Okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's very true.
That's right. So
because we need it to live.
We need it to live. And
right.
It's the same for everybody. Okay? So I think there's lessons to be learned if we look at the water infrastructure of America and how it's quote unquote socialist, call it what you want. It's a social good. It's not a market dynamic.
So interesting.
That's the movement we have to go with zero waste and zero carbon.
I've never heard anyone talk about that before. Why? Did you just think of it?
No, I thought of it before because I think people get afraid about public intervention in industries as big as waste and energy. I've been talking that way for 30 years, and I'm like, don't be afraid of social intervention on these industries. It doesn't mean you're going to lose your business. But it doesn't mean you're going to change. And the science is telling us you have to change. So go with this. And, let's clean it up together. You can still make profits. That's why, Paul Hawken's statement about we don't have to save the earth, we have to save business because business is killing the earth. Right. I read that in the early 90s and went,
yeah, that's an old.
He nailed it.
Yeah, he's been out there ahead of the curve too, just like you have been from the very beginning. And I'm sure it's very frustrating when you've been at this for so long to see this slow pace of change and still worry for your kids and everything. I want to ask you 2 more things. And one is like, what is next for you? I know you're like, you backed off a little bit of your full-time work, but your social enterprise and getting them established, your number one thing that you're working on now?
Well, I'm sort of drifting right now because COVID knocked me off my plan of the zero waste, zero carbon work, and I wanted to do international workshops. And so all of a sudden I couldn't travel anymore. So 3 years.
It knocked me off my plan too. It had a way of doing that to the world. Yeah.
And, and I didn't like all the international travel, but I was rationalizing it, saying if I could help change on the ground in the Greek islands or on the ground in Africa, wherever I was doing these wonderful workshops, then that could make up for the greenhouse gas I just did on the jet.
Right, sure.
But that's been kind of derailed now. And so I've been looking at, the next 10 years, thinking, okay, what's the most impactful thing I can do?
I have a suggestion. You need to run for office. I'm not kidding. I mean, that's where we need your voice. That's where that voice needs to make change so that people can hear you, because they're not going to hear you on as huge as this podcast is. You need a bigger megaphone.
I'd rather your podcast just got bigger and bigger and bigger. They can hear me that way.
I know it's a tall order, but you'd be great at it. I mean, you would. Obviously, you're natural and you have the knowledge, because that's where we're stuck. I think is government. Government change.
I agree.
And Bernie's made a huge. He's in the Senate, but he has changed the world with his bully pulpit, his microphone.
Yeah. He's the guy who knows the truth when he sees it, so he can stand up there and just say it.
He speaks. He knows it, but he has the courage to speak it, which you do too. So
that's right.
That's at least put it in your pipe and smoke it, as they say. Not to take you back or anything.
I worked for government for 1 year in my younger days, and it's extremely frustrating.
I know. That's why we need leaders.
The layers of bureaucracy. I never ran for elected office because I was kind of too busy in the trenches. So I doubt if I'll run for office now. I'm getting a little gray in the beard, and we need the younger people. I want to mentor younger people. So if you can think of a way for me to mentor the youngsters, because we learned a lot of things the last 40 or 50 years, my cohort and I. And industry is going to play the same tricks on the youngsters that they played on us. Industry's tricks don't change, okay? And so I really want to help the youngsters. So I guest lecture at the business school at CU every once in a while, and the kids love it because they're like, okay, what am I walking into? And I'm like, this is the world you're walking into. They're going to flatter you by inviting you to the CEO's meetings, and you're going to put on your suit. You're going to feel very powerful. And you're going to wake up 5 years later and realize, oh, that was a tactic. They just took me off the streets for 5 years and had me sitting in this room listening to the bullshit. I was there. I did that. I thought I was because I was in the room with them.
It's very seductive at the beginning, especially, when you're starting out in your career. Oh, they're going to fly me here. They're going to, it's very seductive.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they know that. And so that's how they get the real activists off the street. Get them in the boardroom and act like they're listening.
Wow. We should talk. I'm going to definitely think about this. I think you're right talking to young people, because you're not answering to anybody. You don't have restrictions, and you're free to lecture and talk and maybe write and things like that. And that could be a really good way for you to contribute in these years where the gray starts coming in, and you're not like me, you don't hide it. Well, let me ask you one last thing, which is just what kind of advice do you give to your kids and to young people that are starting out, in addition to what you just said, and people who want to make bold change? There is no one answer. I understand that, but what pathway can a person take when they're tired of incremental change? Everyone who is young now, most of them want to do something that will make the world better than we did for them and for their kids, and maybe start having children again, since so many of them have 1 in 4 now are saying they won't have kids due to the environment. And that's a huge number, 25%. So I don't know. Do you have advice for the young and positive-minded?
The two things that I tell the youngsters at the business school, basically I say is, number one, understand the power of government. So run for elected office. Well, you just told me. I tell them, get into office. Because you can really, really change the world. And if that's not your cup of tea, then get into business, because it's full of amazing people. You can really change the world from a business seat. So those are the two places that I think. And then as far as what to focus on, whatever pisses you off the most, that's going to be...
I love that. I never heard that advice.
That's going to be an energy source, right?
Yeah.
Go for that. Go for that one. And you learn a lot about how to change the world on that first issue that really pisses you off.
Yeah. So interesting. Eric, this has been fascinating. Really, you're a fountain of information, and it's just been fantastic hearing your insights and seeing you and talking to you just for you.
Yes.
But it's been fun, and I think we should find some way to collaborate on something cool here.
That sounds great to me. I got time on my hands now, and thanks so much for having me on, Debbie.
You can call me Debbie. It's okay. You knew me when I was 8.
That's right. That's all I ever knew.
I wasn't Deborah when I was 8, so to be fair, or even 18. But yeah, so now.
You've done great stuff. I love your podcast, and keep it up. And let's continue this discussion about how I might be able to share with the younger generation.
Yeah, I love that.
There's a bunch of us in my situation where we're all kind of retiring now, but
yeah, it should be used.
Right.
The elders need to speak. Well, now you can go back. You're in Mexico now. You can go back and play in the jungle and swim in the ocean and drink beer and read books while I'm here slaving away in the cold. So enjoy yourself. Think about us suckers up here in the cold. And
okay.
We'll stay in touch. Wonderful to see you.
Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.
Adios.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.